Starmer in hot seat. Farmers in France sparked chaos just hours before Starmer to be hit with his own furious protest. Farmers in France are set to wreak havoc again in the latest round of protests, just hours before Kier Starmer is set to be hit by a stampede of tractors heading towards Westminster. The agricultural workers in France are protesting against the possible signing of a trade deal between the European Union (EU) and 4 South American countries, which they fear could ruin their livelihoods. They argue that the deal would allow an influx of cheap South American agricultural imports produced under less strict environmental standards, which they say creates unfair competition. Earlier this year, activists blockaded Paris with tractors and promised to starve the capital amid a standoff with Emmanuel Macron's government over working conditions, incomes, red tapes, and environmental policies. Now, following rain-hit harvests, livestock disease outbreaks, and delaying of measures promised to farmers following January and February's action, the protests are back, and this time dubbed Act 2. Arnaud Rousseau, head of the largest farming union, the FNSEA, said that the protests would mainly involve demonstrations in front of state buildings and roundabouts, though stressed that their aim was not to inconvenience the French. He said that a deal with the Mercosur trade bloc, composed of Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Bolivia, would represent a bitter cherry on the cake for farmers. Agricultural workers fear that a new deal would bring more beef, chicken, sugar, and maize from Brazil and Argentina, countries they say use pesticides on crops and growth antibiotics in livestock that are banned in Europe. Macron pledged last week to continue to oppose the deal, which is backed by other EU countries such as Germany and Spain. Leading the charge of the new protests are unions like FNSEA and Young Farmers, who are organizing roadblocks and bridge blockades across the nation. "We have the same demands as in January, nothing has changed," Armelle Freicher said on her dairy farm north of Paris. "We must make the government understand that enough is enough." Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau has warned there will be the zero tolerance when it comes to lasting blockades of major French roads. It comes as Starmer is facing his own round of demonstrations from angry farmers following Labour's announcement that it is planning to change some farms' inheritance tax policies. The plans to impose the tax on farms worth more than £1 million have sparked fury among rural communities, who have opposed the government's promise that small farms will not be impacted by the changes. Tomorrow, in an event launched by the National Farmers Union, NFU, 1,800 members will meet with local MPs at Westminster to voice their frustration. Meanwhile, a demonstration is expected to take place in Whitehall. It is estimated between 10,000 and 40,000 people could show up. The Chancellor used her first budget to announce changes to agricultural property relief, April, and business property relief, BPR, from April 2026. Under the new rules, the first £1 million of combined business and agricultural assets will continue to attract no inheritance tax. However, for assets above £1 million, inheritance tax will apply with 50% relief, at an effective rate of 20%. Over the weekend, hundreds of farmers descended on the Welsh Labour conference in Llandudno, which saw agricultural vehicles line up outside Venue Cymru. Inside, Starmer was making a speech. Demonstrators brought tractors, slurry tankers, lorries, and 4x4S with trailers to make their voices heard, whilst placards said that there was blood on Labour hands.